any issue would be resolved. This is an important milestone in the resumed dialogue. We are following the same old pattern, the one that was sort of organized between Mr. Vajpayee and General Musharraf, which is that several committees headed by federal secretaries meet and discuss various issues, and then the foreign secretaries come together to do a kind of review of the progress made. Now, I'm afraid this time, I mean, the Indians have come back to the composite dialogue or comprehensive dialogue or whatever you want to say it. I mean, they are sensitive about the word that you use. And we've gone through the same procedure. Now, I think in my judgment, there were two litmus tests. One was Siachen, the other was Sir Creek, because both of them are doable. I mean, on Siachen, an agreement exists, which is to disengage the troops, withdraw them by a certain distance, and that really that doesn't sort of resolve the issue, but it brings the crisis to an end, and people stop dying, by exchanging fire or through avalanches and snowdrifts at that impossible height. Now, we know for some time that the Prime Minister of India wants to do it, but the Indian Army has put its foot down, and they want certain preconditions which are not acceptable to Pakistan. So that didn't move forward. Sir Creek is even easier. The only Indian objection was that we were using 1914 100 maps, British maps, and the Sir Creek being what it is, it has changed its configuration, and that a new survey was required. Now, this new survey was done in the last couple of years with the latest, most sort of scientific, state-of-the-art technology, photographs from the space, satellite pictures, and there is no disagreement on that at all. Now, all that is needed is that the two sides, the experts sit down and set up the markers, I mean, as to where the demarcation would be. Now, neither of them really succeeded. I mean, people met, there were cordial meetings, but they did not achieve much. So, really, there is not much that the two foreign secretaries have to review. And the whole idea was that the foreign secretaries would really, sort of put it all together, and that in the next month, which would be July, the foreign ministers can then take it forward, and that can possibly lead to a summit. Now, my impression is, the only explanation I can think of is that India has judged or misjudged the situation. They feel that while they would like to continue the dialogue, keep the tension low, they do not think that time has come to settle any issue with Pakistan. The Prime Minister of India keeps saying it. He says he has a vision that embraces Afghanistan and Central Asia and whatnot, but in actual practice we do not see that happening. I think one reason is that the Indian establishment wants to delay it till Pakistan gets a little weaker and stops resisting demands like the overland transit to Afghanistan. Pakistan still has not conceded that. So I think it's a game of wearing Pakistan down, and India has not really hidden its glee, its sort of joy at the situation in Pakistan, which is not good at all. And quite honestly, if you go by the theory of political negotiations, the more powerful side hardly ever negotiates with you. I mean, if you are in a position like this where you can deteriorate further. So I think we have to approach, I agree with Mr. Krishna, I think it will be a pleasant meeting. There will be a lot of clearing of information, and probably there will be a lot of Indian pressure on certain individuals like Hafiz Saeed and Dawood Ibrahim and so on and so forth. And I think reiteration that the process would continue, but I don't think we should expect anything spectacular to be announced day after tomorrow.
Mr. Khan, do you feel perhaps these issues, we have been trying to resolve these for the past 60 years or so now, they don't seem to be going anywhere. Do you think it might be a better idea to start out with smaller steps, perhaps start out with trade between the two countries, perhaps cultural student exchanges? Do you think once those kind of exchanges are initiated, then we could maybe move on to the bigger issues?
Yeah, well, in theory, yes. You see, this is what we did way back in 2005, 2006.
Right.
We negotiated a number of confidence-building measures. Unfortunately, none of them really worked. I mean, there were some important things that we had agreed to do: cooperation in terrorism, trade across the line of control in Kashmir, easy travel in Kashmir and elsewhere. None of this has actually materialized, because once it's fine in theory, but in actual practice, when people want to travel, particularly in Kashmir, the two intelligence services are so difficult that in the end people just give up the intention of traveling. So I entirely agree, but there are certain things when it comes to trade. India keeps on linking trade up with Pakistan, giving India the right to transit through overland through Pakistan to Afghanistan and to Central Asia. Now that is, I mean, in international law, this would be fine. But Pakistan drags its feet on that because it's the card that Pakistan doesn't want to throw away without getting something in return.
Of course.
And I think what they want in return is a meaningful, result-oriented dialogue which registers progress in all directions, including, as I mentioned earlier on, Siachen, Sir Creek. I mean, India is not really being realistic. I mean, India expects that Pakistan should keep on conceding more and more points while they block even the easy agreements. I mean, I have dealt with both Siachen and Sir Creek in my own sort of career in the Foreign Office. Nothing is easier. I mean, nothing is easier than pulling your troops back by 5 kilometers and putting an end to a totally futile, meaningless, inhuman conflict. And Sir Creek is essential because under international law, we have a certain time limit by which we have to determine a fixed point on the coast, which is the Kathiawar Sindh coast, and that point of reference helps us determine what is called the maritime boundary, which extends far into the sea, and that is absolutely essential because you have to determine your jurisdiction over natural resources or fishing. The sea is full of treasures.
Absolutely.
That, I mean, what we see actually is that, and you broadcast it every day and you show pictures, Indian and Pakistani sort of simple, ordinary fishermen, they get arrested, they rot in for 3 or 4 months or more in our jails, and then they're set free, and then the media says it's a big gesture. It's all happening because the maritime boundary doesn't exist. And the maritime boundary doesn't exist because there is no reference point on the coast from which the line has to be drawn. And that will not be drawn unless we settle the Sir Creek.
Well, thank you very much for your enlightening thoughts, Mr. Tanvir Ahmad Khan, the former